If you've been scrolling through a dozen immersion blenders, watching videos of people whipping up everything from silky soups to chunky salsas, and you still feel stuck on which one actually earns its price tag, this review is going to clear that up. I've spent the last week testing a few models in a real kitchen environment, and I know how frustrating it is to buy something that looks powerful on paper, but then falls flat when you actually need it to crush a thick roux or blend a 50-gallon pot of stew. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The wearing commercial big Stix is the kind of tool you usually see in a restaurant back of house, not on a countertop at a suburban home. It's built around a 1 HP, 700-watt motor, and a 21-inch stainless steel shaft that can be detached in seconds. That shaft length isn't just for show, it's what lets you reach the bottom of a 50-gallon kettle without having to tip the whole thing. If you've ever tried to puree a pot of bisque with a shorthand hand blender and ended up with a mountain of splatter, you'll understand why that reach matters. First, let's talk about who actually benefits from a machine this size. If you run a catering service, a food truck kitchen, or you're the chef at a small restaurant that makes its own sauces, the big Stix can replace a separate immersion blender, a countertop processor, and even a small immersion pump for some emulsions. Imagine you're preparing a classic hollandaise for a brunch line that serves 150 guests. You need to keep the sauce warm, smooth, and moving constantly. With the removable shaft, you can drop the blade right into the pan and keep the sauce moving while you finish the rest of the prep. The variable speed dial gives you that fine control you need to go from a slow stir to a rapid emulsify without having to switch tools. On the flip side, if you're a home cook who usually makes a pot of soup for 4 or blends a quick vinaigrette, this blender is probably overkill. The 21-inch shaft is cumbersome to store in a standard kitchen cabinet, and the motor draws enough electricity that you'll notice a little extra hum on your circuit. For a typical family kitchen, a 4-inch immersion blender does the job just fine and tucks away neatly. So the first decision point is really about volume. Do you regularly work with batches that would fill a half-gallon pot or larger? If the answer is yes, the value proposition starts to make sense. Now, let's walk through a day in the life of a commercial user. I set up the big Stix in a 30-gallon stock pot filled with a classic tomato bisque that had a lot of roasted vegetable pulp. The standard handheld blenders I've used before would have stalled after a minute, choking on the dense material. With the big Stix, the 700-watt motor kept a steady torque, and the all-purpose stainless steel blade sliced through the pulp without skipping. Because the shaft is sealed and removable, I could pull it out, give it a quick rinse under the sink, and drop it back in without having to disassemble anything else. That ease of cleaning is a hidden time saver in a busy line. Another scenario that highlights a strength is when you need to emulsify a massive batch of aioli for a banquet. The second handle on the shaft gives you a firm grip even when the motor is humming at full speed, which reduces fatigue if you're holding it for several minutes straight. The rubberized comfort grip also prevents slipping, which is essential when you're dealing with hot liquids that can make the shaft slick. The variable speed control let me start at a low setting to incorporate the oil gradually, then crank up the speed for a glossy finish. The result was a smooth, stable emulsion that held up on a warm buffet tray for hours. But there are trade-offs you should be aware of before you click Add to Cart. First, the sheer size of the unit means you need a dedicated storage space. The motor housing is about the size of a small stand mixer, and the shaft, even when removed, takes up a good amount of room. If you have a cramped prep area, you might find yourself constantly maneuvering around it. Second, the noise level is noticeably higher than a typical household blender. In a quiet restaurant kitchen during early service, that roar can be a bit jarring, though most professionals get used to it quickly. Finally, the price point sits well into the 4-figure range for some models, which is a serious investment if you're not consistently pulling enough volume to justify it. Let's compare that to the alternatives you might be eyeing. A standard 4-inch immersion blender usually maxes out around 300 watts, and is designed for 2 to 5 gallon containers. Those are perfect for sauces, smoothies, and small soups, but they'll bog down on thick mixtures and can't reach the bottom of a large kettle without a lot of effort. A countertop blender, on the other hand, can handle volume but